Right. So this is the last part of our topic today. So after discussing ways to do research, now we're going to talk about the crisis that plaguing social psychology. So there are two kinds of crisis that hit social psychology quite hard. So the first crisis arose as a consequences of being dependent, overly dependent to experimental method. As I may have said earlier in the previous video, is that even though experimental method could provide evidence with the highest rigor, and you could basically do the highest quality of research by doing experimental method compared to other design, for example. Well, it's not always like that, but most of the time would give you better results. But the problem is that when we're talking about social psychology, we could not leave out the social part of it. So the problem is that it's always about the external validity. So the research that we conduct in laboratory setting, could we generalize the idea to the real world setting? That would be quite upsetting, because of course the laboratory circumstances would be significantly different from our reality. It would significantly differ from our reality. So that's why people keep questioning about the validity of the theory. How we could be sure about the overly reductionistic nature of the social psychology research, and we could make sure that those conclusions or those findings would apply in a real life setting. That would be a huge question mark, I would say. Yeah, and also when we're talking about social part of the social psychology, it's slightly impossible. I think it doesn't make sense at all when we're only doing research in individual, even though we're doing psychology and it concerns an individual. But we need to inject more social context into our study, in our research setting. So we need to conclude, we need to make sure that the research that we're doing do not leave out the social part of it. Yeah, so that is one of the huge critic. Yeah, came from a well-known social psychologist, Kenneth Gergen from the UK. And if you are keen on reading the complete critics from Kenneth Gergen, you just click on this link, and it will direct you to the paper. Yeah, it is a very famous paper, and it was one of my most favorite paper to read, and it's extremely engaging and entertaining to read. Yeah, so I recommend you to take your time to read the whole critics. Yeah, so the article is titled "Social Psychology as History." That's very interesting. And also one of the main concern came from Kenneth Gergen is that social psychology is overly positivistic. We overly use and overly relying our theory on a positivistic model, on empirical data, on hard facts, while we know that some of our psychological constructs, they are not be able to be directly observed. Things like personality or motivation, this is something that we could not easily observe. And relying on hard facts would give us misleading conclusions, Kenneth Gergen says. But again, that would be it's a problem. Yeah, it's a dilemma. Yeah, it's a dilemma that we need to choose. Yeah, between counting on hard facts. Well, while we know it's easily verifiable, but we know that there is a downfall. Yeah, to that decision. We know that not every psychological phenomena could be observed directly in a certain setting. Yeah. And the second biggest critics, I think that the huge crisis that we are now in, yeah, it's not yet resolved until now. So we have something that we call replication crisis, yeah, and it concerns on the consistency and the robustness of psychological research. Normally, if you're a scientist and you're trying to disprove or prove a theory, you want your research to be, you want your conclusion to be consistent. So if other researchers try the same procedure as you did, normally you want that researcher found the same exact thing as you also found. Yeah. So it means that your findings is replicated in another context. There's some consistency, so you can be sure that your findings or your conclusion is credible because it is consistent. Now, but the problem is that most psychological theories, and this would be surprising because lots of psychological theories are not replicable. Yeah, so when other researchers, independent team of researchers, try to redo the whole procedure, they did not find consistent finding as the original author or the original researchers claimed. And then it makes a quite confusing situation where we don't know to be sure which theories are actually replicable, which is closer to the truth because we know it is consistent, and which theories are just completely rubbish and we just cannot rely on that theory anymore because we could not find the coherence between the theory and also the facts, the real facts that we live in. And that creates something that we call replication crisis. And it's extremely disturbing because when you look at the textbook, you look at the psychological textbook, not only social psychology, but the whole psychology in general, and then you try and you start to wonder which theories are actually closer to the truth and which theories are just basically nonsensical conclusion. Yeah. And then it would gives us in a limbo situation where we are in doubt whether psychology is actually scientific or not, because people keep questioning whether psychology is scientific or not. And I would say that we're not completely scientific because we still believe in lots of theories that are just completely nonsensical. Things like psychoanalysis, it's completely unfalsifiable. It's really hard to actually prove whether psychoanalysis theory is whether it's testable. It's not testable at all. It's a really bad theories, but you will learn that theories along with your degree, and people keep talking as if psychoanalysis theory is real. And the problem is that we could not make sure whether it's closer to the truth because, when you rely on anecdotal observation or case studies, for example, we cannot be sure that the pattern would be similar or would be consistent to other people. And also it indicates that social psychologists or psychologists in general, they don't do their job very well when doing research, when testing their theories. Yeah. It means that you cannot completely trust psychologists when they talk nonsense. Yeah. And so that it comes with the cautions. Whatever you learned during your degree, do not take it for granted. I think it's better to take a step back and try to look for another sources whether those theories actually make sense. Yeah, do not take it for granted. And do not trust psychologists. And even worse, it may be an indication that some psychologists are just doing a really dodgy and fishy research. They might fabricate the data, and this is something that is not very odd or not very unusual because in the past few years back, there has been a famous case where some psychologists, they fabricate their data. One of the most important cases in social psychology is one committed by someone from Tilburg University in Netherlands, Dirk Stapel, and he was caught fabricate lots of his data in his papers and experiments, and he was fired, of course, and then it gave lots of people distrust in our field. Some people would say that whether our field could be trusted and could be counted as credible. But the good news is, I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but the same problem is not happened only in psychology or social psychology, but it happens in a lot of disciplines, in lots of scientific disciplines. And you might be surprised that other disciplines like biomedical studies, or even engineering, or even physics, they actually suffer the exact same problem as we are. Yeah, so there's a very, very good video that I'd like you to watch, and I think it's better for you to watch it yourself, and it's available on your slide. And just click on the link, and it will give you a very interesting a description of reproducibility or replication crisis in science. And it would give you an impression that the same problem, it also happens in other scientific disciplines. So not only in psychology, but also in a lots of scientific disciplines. Yeah, so, well, basically science is not as easy as you read in your textbook. It's harder than it looks. And me as a scientist myself, I did research several times, even though I'm just an early career. I've done research multiple times, and I could assure you it is harder than it looks. And it's harder to do actual research than teach students how to do good research. Yeah, it's hard, but it does not always give you. It does not guarantee you to give you good results that you always desire. Yeah, so this is something that not everybody likes. But of course, being a scientist means that you are doing a job. You're doing an important job of revealing the truth or approaching the truth, and to enlighten people that who's not doing what you're doing now. Yeah, so it's an important job, but lots of suffering needed. Yeah, and that would be the end of this course. So I should kindly remind you, if you have any questions, just drop in a WhatsApp group. But if you'd like to be anonymous, just click on the spreadsheet link and you just drop your questions there without putting any personal identity to keep yourself remain anonymous. You can ask your questions in English or in Bahasa, I don't care. And if you'd like to help me by answering existing questions, I would extremely appreciate it. And if you'd like to meet me in person, I'm always available every Friday at 11 to 12. And you just freely pop in whenever you like in that time. And if you want to meet me in other schedule outside the drop-in session, outside my office hour, you just drop me an email and we could arrange the schedule. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope this material of this video would give you an information, or at least a glimpse of understanding social psychology. So thank you very much for watching.